you all for being here today. I just want to take a moment to acknowledge that we are on the unceded territory of the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tezewahoo peoples. And I just want to give an incredible feeling of gratitude towards those nations and my deepest respect for the use of their land today. Thank you. And I'll start by introducing our first speaker, Badger, who's going to tell us about the climate emergency.
Good morning, everyone. My name's Badger. I work for a non-profit in the city, and I'm an organizer with Extinction Rebellion Vancouver. And I'm terrified for everyone in this room about where we are heading. So I'm going to talk about the climate science and the situation that we're facing. So just to set some context, 1995 was when COP1 happened. I was 2 years old. Zane, that's going to speak later, wasn't even born yet. That is how long we've been talking about this. I am tired of how long we have been talking about this. I am tired of how long we've been talking about how long they've been talking about this. 2015, Paris Climate Agreement came. Still, nothing has happened. 2019, Canada declared a climate emergency. All the time we've been talking, and we have known about the climate science, climate change, global warming. We knew way before 1995. But we got a global conference of parties organized by the UN. So we don't get that for everything. We've been talking about it. They knew it was a deal, and nothing has been done. In 1995, the CO2 in the atmosphere was 361 parts per million. And then we get to today. We're coming up to COP26. So they have been talking and agreed that climate change is a problem. Since 1995, we've had 25 of these meetings to say we should do something, and we're going to do something about it. And we come to today. We are now at 413 parts per million of CO2 in the atmosphere. And this has gone up due to fossil fuel industry. We're also at 1.1 degrees Celsius of warming compared to pre-industrial levels. And I want to ask, how do we feel today? How did this summer feel for everyone?
Shitty!
Scared! When we had the heat dome, we had the wildfires. Lytton, with the greatest respect to the families and that community, was burned to the ground in a day. Did this feel comfortable?
No.
Do we feel comfortable at 1.1 degrees? The Paris Agreement was for us to limit warming well below 2 degrees, preferably below 1.5 degrees. We're now at 1.1. This does not feel comfortable. We're going, so 1.5, which is the thing we should aim for, that's not safe. And the latest IPCC report, which came out recently, has said we will go above 1.5 degrees by 2040 in all scenarios. That is guaranteed now. And to show where we're going, Lauren, if you would be able to come up and be a volunteer. So would you go to sit in this chair?
Yep.
And Zane, do you want to come up and help with this?
Sure.
Let's just use a metaphor here. So we have this on nice and lightly. So this, Lauren's head here, represents our planet. It also represents our future and our children's future and our grandchildren's future. And all this time, we have been tightening the bag just a little bit more, a little bit more. And actually, while you're doing that, you know what? You tighten that a little bit more for me. Thank you very much. This has got us to the point of code red for humanity. And I don't know what more words we can use to be extreme on this. We have climate crisis, climate emergency, climate breakdown. Sir David King, the former scientific advisor to the UK, has said we have 3 years left to save humanity. And I'm going to this is where we are today, this is where we're going forward. So even if we were to switch the pipes off and all things now, we are locked in for 2.5 degrees of warming. This is due to a few simple scientific reasons. Number 1 is carbon lag. When carbon goes into the atmosphere, it still takes a little time for it to start heating the planet, around 20 to 30 years. So even if we turn the pipes off magically, right now we have 20 to 30 years of the last emissions, which have been the greatest ever in the history of our planet, coming down the pipes, warming the thing. And that locks us in for an additional 0.7 degrees of warming. We're at 1.1 now, bit of maths, that takes us to 1.8. So we're already above 1.5, this is what they said in all scenarios. The next factor is called global dimming. So again, if we turned off these pipes, all these pollutants that we put in the air, they would settle down, and actually they are blocking the sun's rays, so we would actually get additional heat coming through from the sun. That is another 0.7 degrees Celsius of warming. 1.8 plus 0.7, we're now at 2.5. We are way past the Paris Agreement. Even if those measurements are a little bit out, and we said 2 degrees is definitely not safe. We already know 1.1 degrees isn't safe. And so at 2 degrees of warming on a global scale, that equals 4 degrees of warming in the middle of continents. And what happens at 4 degrees? Grain farming becomes unsustainable. It isn't possible to farm grain at those temperatures where they're sustained over a long period of time. What does that lead to? Mass starvation. And I say that again. At 2 degrees of global warming, we will see mass starvation. But we haven't turned the pipes off. In fact, we are accelerating. Our emissions are continuing to go up, and they're increasing at the rate which they go up. So we're actually on track for 4 degrees of warming by the year 2100. Children born today will be alive in the year 2100. Potentially people alive today will be alive in that year. Plus 4 degrees on a global scale, that equals plus 8 degrees in the middle of the continent. And at 8 degrees, all commercial, industrial farming becomes unsustainable. If you have temperatures above 30 degrees for more than 3 months of the year, that equals a famine. Even greater mass starvation on a global scale. And when there is mass starvation and food shortages, we have seen this historically in the past, time and time again, it leads to societal collapse. It leads to war. It's going to lead to poverty, mass displacement, and death of millions of people around the globe. And that is the path that we are accelerating ourselves towards. And this is going to happen not slowly, not gradually. It's going to be an accelerating curve because we have feedback loops. We have tipping points. The Arctic ice is melting. We are seeing permafrost melt. We are expecting there will be one ice-free Arctic in September, like the Arctic will be ice-free in September at least once between 2050. That is a global change on the map. And this is with conservative estimates. Scientific estimates are always conservative. And every time a new report's out, the answer is, it's happening quicker than we thought. It's happening sooner than we think. This is happening sooner than we think. It's gonna be sooner. It's gonna happen. We are on track for a societal collapse. The only report that seems to be on track is one that came out in the 1970s to say we are on track for a societal collapse. And a 2017 report said we have a 1 in 20 chance of species extinction. Would you get on a plane which had a 1 in 20 chance of falling out of the sky? So that is the situation, and that is why we must act right now. But currently, we're not acting. We are funding our own destruction. And to talk about that funding, I'm going to pass it over to Lauren. Talk about fossil fuels, please.
My name's Lauren. I'm an academic and the mother of 2 little girls. When we think of oil and gas, we think of the Middle East, and we think of the United States. But Canada is the 4th largest producer of oil and gas in the world. We are also the worst in terms of subsidizing this very industry. Per capita, we pay more to the oil and gas industry than anywhere else in the world. And that means that you, as individual citizens, are personally paying more to this industry that is leading to the effects that Badger talked about than any other citizen, any other person on the planet. I encourage you to think about how that feels. How does it feel that your hard-earned dollars given to our government are paying for our own destruction? Now let me tell you the scale of the problem. By, again, conservative estimates by the CDC, in a single year, in 2020, the federal government gave $16 billion to the oil and gas industry. And that's just the Canadian government. The British Columbian government gave $1.6 billion. Other provincial governments also give that scale of money and often much more than British Columbia. What would that translate to? Oftentimes these dollars are thrown around. We got really upset about a $500 million election, myself included. But we're talking much more on the scale of that. If you think just about the federal government, what could $1.6 billion pay for? Well, annual health care costs for 3 million Canadians. 1.6 million people transition to new jobs. That's entire job training, a year of job training for 1.6 million people. Or education for 1.2 million children. That's how much money we are giving to the oil and the fossil fuel industries. And in turn, even today, 1 in 5 deaths worldwide is attributed to air pollution from the fossil fuel industry. That's 35 million people, or the equivalent of 35,000 people in Canada alone. Again, a tiny country. 35,000 deaths a year could be attributed to air pollution from the oil and gas industry. Today, we have that effect. What is this going to be like tomorrow and in the future? So, the October Rebellion for Extinction Rebellion is to demand something very simple, which is that the governments, the British Columbian government and the federal government of Canada, end these subsidies. End them. We do not want to pay for these oil and gas industries anymore. We're not asking the government to shut down these industries. We're not even asking them to keep their international agreements for the level of carbon for our society. We are simply asking them to not use our own money to pay for our own extinction. We instead want them to use this money for just transitions for the workers and the areas of Canada involved. We are a compassionate people, and we know we all live and exist in this toxic society. We do not judge any individual person. We love everyone. And we want this money to be used to help any person in any part of Canada that would be affected by the ending of these subsidies. But we no longer want to pay for the rich people who own these companies. And in fact, the International Monetary Fund, a deeply conservative organization worldwide, has a report that says that these subsidies, of which the Canadian government is deeply guilty of, particularly and preferentially benefit the rich. They are not helping the individual workers in Alberta or Newfoundland. In fact, our own Canadian government shows that per sector of subsidies for job creation, the money that it's giving to oil and gas is inefficient. The least efficient for job creation of any other industry in Canada. So why on earth are we giving them this money? We are going to go to the streets. We are going to demand that the Canadian government end these subsidies now. I will not be complicit in our own destruction as a species. Now I'll pass it over to Zane to tell us more about the plans for the October Rebellion.
Yeah, so first of all, I just wanted to talk about how the reason why we don't have a lot of journalists here. And the reason why we don't have a lot of journalists here is because we're not shutting down an airport. So the next time the press asks you, well, why don't you guys use other means to raise awareness of your issue, this press conference is proof that those other means often don't work. Which is why on the 25th, we'll be shutting down the airport. And that's going to be the major action. And the reason for that is because the airport is a euphemism nowadays for a sort of center of mass extermination. Because when we block that airport, the press is going to say, you're disrupting the great Canadian public. And what we're going to say is that this airport is resulting in the destruction of this country. And we're going to have spokespersons for that day who are going to be willing to come on live television if needed. And I know that Brent's not here right now, but the analogy he used about...
Could you repeat what you said about live television? I missed that.
Oh, yeah, you'll have spokespersons who are going to be willing to come on live television on the airport action day if needed. And just every day, any day. Yeah, so Brent's not here, but an analogy he uses to describe subsidies is that it's like someone selling you fentanyl and then saying that they'll pay for your rehab. And that's how we need to look at subsidies, is that it just completely makes no sense. Which is why at COP26, starting on the 1st of November, our plan is to humiliate the Prime Minister. So they either have the option of ending subsidies immediately, or looking at an arrest tally of dozens, if not 100 people, and being embarrassed by that at COP. And cancelling the subsidies, the Prime Minister can just see this as being something in his own self-interest. Because if these subsidies are cancelled, then Canada can stand tall as a world leader at COP26, being the first major leader to cancel subsidies for fossil fuels. So I'll just read out some of the days in order. The first day, most days we're gathering in Nelson Park, and the weekday actions are starting at 4:30 p.m., and the weekend actions are starting at 12 p.m. The first day we're gathering at Nelson Park, and we're going on to Burrard in Georgia. And by blocking Burrard in Georgia, the traffic on Georgia Street will be backed up all the way to the Lionsgate Bridge, and so, at least some of the traffic. And we're going to do that for the first day, and for the second day, we'll be blocking Commercial and Broadway. And we'll be gathering at Grandview Park at around 12 p.m. for the first 2 days. For the third day and for the fourth day, we're blocking Granville and Georgia 2 days in a row, and we're gathering at Nelson Park to do that. And for the fifth day, we're blocking the Broad Street Bridge. This will be the third time Extinction Rebellion is blocking the Broad Street Bridge. And whenever in the past we blocked the Broad Street Bridge, we've got high numbers of arrests. The first time it was around 11, the second time it was around 12, and this time around I think it's going to be the same, if not more. And the sixth day is Georgia and Canby, and the Georgia and Canby will block access to the Georgia Viaduct going out of downtown. And we were going to do that 2 days in a row, I believe. So yeah, that's day 6. That's just one day, Georgia and Canby on the 21st of October, and we're gathering in Nelson Park again. And day 7 is the Canby Street Bridge, and day 8 is the Canby Street Bridge again. That would be very helpful. So we're blocking the Canby Street Bridge 2 days in a row. Because the first day we'll be told that you're not allowed at Canby Street Bridge anymore after we block it and after people are arrested. On the second day, people are going to disobey those orders, and we're going to double down on our civil disobedience and disobey police orders to not return to that bridge. On the 24th of October, we'll be blocking the TransCanada Highway, or at least an off-ramp that goes onto the TransCanada Highway. We'll be gathering at Phillips Park, and we'll be going on to this intersection of Boundary and Grandview. And for this particular act, we are inspired by this movement, this new movement in the UK called Insulate Britain, and they've been blocking the M25 for 4 weeks now, and there have been around 400 arrests been made of just 100 people who are doing it again and again and again. And so that's an example of how a small group of people can have an effect where they can come on national television because 500,000 people are unable to get to work, for example. And we're doing this because we're part of a family, and we're not just doing bad things to bad people, we're not just going to banks, and we're not just going to corporations. We are disrupting the society because that's what the civil rights movement did. Because we're part of a community, and we're part of a community of struggle. And right now, the society is willingly, knowing full well what climate change means, is engaging in cooperation with the genocidal government, with the genocidal Canadian government. Because as it was mentioned earlier, 2 degrees means that we're looking at mass starvation and the destruction of this country. And the federal government and the people who are in it right now are traitors and are committing treason. So when we go to the streets and when we break the law, not only are we taking part in civil disobedience, we are exercising our legal obligation and our moral obligation to bring this government down, because this government is acting in a treasonous way. That's why on the 25th, the day after the highway, we're going to be blocking the YVR airport. The CEO of YVR airport is the Chancellor of SFU, the same person whom I gave the ultimatum to for a hunger strike if they don't divest. And she said that the airport will be net zero carbon emissions by 2030. Now think about what net zero carbon emissions for an airport means. I don't know if people have noticed, but airports are where airplanes land and take off. And you cannot have a net zero airport if you have airplanes over there, unless you don't want to count the only thing that makes an airport an airport. So we're going to be calling out this hypocrisy by closing down the airport. And also it's worth remembering that the airport, under this chancellor, I believe, oversaw a $300 million expansion project of the terminal, which is criminal during a climate emergency, to have an airport expansion project paid for by the taxpayer.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Two questions. One is, to what degree is Extinction Rebellion Vancouver influenced by Roger Hallam and his thinking?
Well, I mean, I think Roger is someone who was a farmer, and he sold off his farm in order to be in service to the rebellion. And he's an expert on social movements because he did research on this for 5 years at King's College, which led to the founding of Extinction Rebellion. So we do take a lot of inspiration from his expertise in the field of social movements.
The second question then is, because how they did it at Heathrow was through the use of drones. And I'm wondering if you're planning on using drones to achieve the objective of shutting down the airport.
Potentially, but we haven't made up our mind.
Okay.
If that happens, I might be the one doing it, but we certainly will be blocking the road that goes onto the airport. So we'll be gathering at Flight Path Park, and then we'll be going onto the road soon.
Okay.
So the 26th, we're blocking the UBC 2 days in a row, because although they did commit to divestment, I don't think they have divested more than 2% so far. And so it was a false promise that was made to the hunger strikers, to the Extinction Rebellion hunger strikers 2 years ago. And they haven't been keeping up with that promise, which is why we're escalating and we'll be shutting down the roads going into UBC. So we'll be doing that 2 days in a row. And on the 28th, we're doing a snake march throughout downtown Vancouver, where the routes will be unplanned. And it's going to likely end at Quebec and Terminal, where again, we'll expect arrests every day of the rebellion. And on the 29th, we're blocking Main and Broadway, gathering at Nelson Park again. And I just wanted to leave people with this quote from Peter Carter. who is a Vancouver Island-based IPCC expert
Yeah, I know
IPCC
who he
reviewer.
is actually, because I've read his book.
Right. And he says that we don't have 3 years left, we don't have 2 years left, we are in negative years now.
Yeah.
Right? So when, with all due respect, when NGOs say that we can stay below 1.5 and we can still stop climate change, it's just not true. We are in negative years now, so it's not just about mitigating climate change, it's about holding treasonous government officials accountable and putting them on trial ultimately. So if there is no energy subsidy for fossil fuels, we will be humiliating the Prime Minister in Glasgow on the 1st of November.
Thank you, James. I'm going to take just a couple of minutes to talk about emergency vehicles. It has never been the case that Extinction Rebellion has blocked the movement of emergency vehicles, and it never will be the case. In fact, we're working closely with the Vancouver Fire Department to ensure that we do not. When we are blocking an intersection, we'll make sure that everyone's belongings are close to them, and we are prepared to immediately, at the hearing of a siren, move out of the intersection, clear it, and allow ambulances and fire trucks to pass. In fact, I was personally blocking the intersection of Main and Broadway, and within about 30 seconds, the entire intersection was cleared in hearing a siren, and the ambulance easily passed through. And we will be doing that for all of these. So we are working closely with all emergency services, and particularly the fire department, the Vancouver Fire Department, to ensure no obstruction of any emergency vehicles in any of these actions. We are here to help a just transition, and we are absolutely distinct from any other organization that willingly hurts people through the blocking of emergency vehicles or hospitals. So now, with all of that in mind, what I would like to do is I would like to say, encourage Badger and Zane to come up here and help me sign. We have copies of our ultimatums for this particular rebellion. We are going to be couriering them to the Prime Minister's office, to Premier Horgan, and Mr. Yasmin Singh, who holds the balance of power in this new government. We're going to sign them from Vancouver Rebellion, and over social media, we are going to be couriering them to these offices. Now, it's particularly important to send it to the Prime Minister's office because we know he has a habit of forgetting important things and just heading off on vacation. So we really want to make sure that he knows that this is happening and that this is his opportunity to make right on our international obligations and our international commitments to end these subsidies, to reduce our fossil fuel consumption, and frankly, to save the planet. Zane did not exaggerate when the actions to actually support the industries that are literally killing people today and will lead to mass extinction, decades of science has shown that, supporting those industries is treasonous. It disproportionately impacts people in different places of the world. How is that not genocide? Here we are standing up as a group of citizens. You will see the numbers of us in the October Rebellion leading to arrests, showing the society that the only moral thing to do in an unmoral society is to rebel.
Can I ask a question, Lauren?
It is now time for questions.
How many people do you expect to participate in this direct action?
Well, it's to an extent it's difficult to tell ultimately, but we are really inspired, I would repeat again, by the Insulate Britain movement in the UK, where a small group of people have been blocking the M25 day after day after day, and by doing that they've been able to, with the small group, but with a lot of arrests, they've been able to raise the profile of the issue surrounding insulation in that case, but in our case, subsidies for fossil fuels.
One of the things we've seen in the UK though too is kind of a Extinction Rebellion and Roger Hallam having some disagreements, and I'm wondering if, like, it sounds like you guys like the Roger Hallam approach, which is more militant perhaps than Extinction Rebellion, which might surprise some people out in the community.
Yeah.
Am I correct with that?
I think the important thing is, like, you might say the actions are more militant or more extreme, but actually in this situation we have to consider that our actions are proportionate to the situation that we're in.
Right.
The extreme thing to do is to sit at home and watch Netflix and do nothing. So.
Also, the other thing I would just say is that if we were dealing with littering in the neighborhood, we didn't have to block roads. We would just put out a leaflet and then you would clean it up. That's not entrenched power, that's just laziness. If you're dealing with a wage issue, then you would just do a strike. But if you're dealing with the biggest crime in human history, you do have to have high risk, high return actions, like shutting down the airport. Because nothing short of that is going to create the national conversation we need to have about subsidy.
Thank you. Okay. I gotta get back. As far as your speech, Lauren, are you comfortable sharing it with me, or would you rather just keep it? I know you read it. And then it
I
was the time on
but
TransCanada.
I am more than likely to give you what I wrote.
Okay, thank you.
My
Okay.
pleasure.
And how about you, Zane? I know you were reading Badger from your notes, so you didn't have a speech.
Yeah.
It would only be for the purpose of writing. I wouldn't be distributing it to anyone. I wouldn't be putting it online.